Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 8 of the Choose UCalgary Podcast. Again, my name is Karah, and I'm your host this season. Today, we sit down with Chris Jang, a Student Recruitment Specialist here at the University of Calgary, to talk more on the process of applying as a transfer student. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So I think to get going, we're just going to start with a quick introduction of yourself and your title and your role at the University of Calgary.
Yeah, so my name's Chris. I work at the University of Calgary as the Transfer Recruitment Specialist for the recruitment team. I've been here for around 4 months, but before this I used to work on the admission side, so I used to do a lot of the transfer evaluations. My role at the university is just to help out potential transfer students.
Nice. Okay, perfect. So I think we're just going to move into a couple of common questions that I think we find transfer students ask a lot. So we're just trying to kind of clear the air and make sure everybody has the right information. So first question here is, what are transfer applications and how are they different from high school student applications?
Right. So there's no specific transfer application that we have. It's all under the same application you would do as if maybe when you were a high school student. The only difference is now instead of meeting potential high school prerequisites, you're looking at transfer prerequisites. That could be anything related to high school courses as well as potentially post-secondary course requirements as well. The other big difference really that we're looking at too is going to be your GPA. So instead of using your high school grades, we're going to look at your GPA from your post-secondary history.
Okay, cool. And then how many credits of post-secondary coursework does a student need in order to be considered a transfer applicant? So where's that threshold where it now pushes them over into being a transfer applicant?
So on our calendars, it's going to be more than 12 units of coursework that's academically accredited from our academic institution. Typically what that means is 4 classes with each course being around 3 credits. Some places such as University of Victoria, a lot of their classes are going to be 1.5 credits. So it's not like they need now more coursework. It's just like what is the equivalent coursework when you come to the University of Calgary.
Yeah, definitely. And then how would we determine if a student has completed post-secondary at an approved institution? So you did say accredited, approved. So what makes an institution accredited or approved?
So the main thing that we really look at is going to be like, is your institution degree granting? If it's a university, for example, do they offer the bachelor's degree, the master's, that sort of thing? Mm-hmm. Almost essentially every university in Canada will be accredited. Really, most of the coursework you're doing in there as well will be considered as part of those 12 units or more. Unless really you're doing high school upgrading, almost every class can essentially be considered as academic. Where it gets a little bit trickier is when you look at colleges, diplomas, that sort of thing, depending on the content of that material or the coursework that you're doing. So for example, if you're doing like a paramedic diploma, in some schools it can be considered academic, in other schools it cannot be. Something like culinary arts, we would typically never consider as academic, but usually that process is done after you apply to the University of Calgary. So part of what the job of our evaluators is to go and take a look at your coursework and see if it is academic.
Definitely. So we're just trying to see if it lines up with something that the University of Calgary has.
Yeah, ideally we're giving you as much as we can because we do want you to be in school for the least amount of time possible, but it depends on what courses you do, so it's a kind of a case-by-case basis.
Definitely, yeah. So for students who, before they submit an application, is there a tool students can use to check their transfer credits before they apply?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest question that I get asked is I've heard about your University of Calgary, I've heard about this program I really want to do, but it really depends on if I can get transfer credit, because if I'm not able to get any transfer credit, sometimes just students might not be interested in coming here.
Yeah.
Really, the biggest tool will be our transfer credit search tool. It's offered online, or you can look at it online. It's the same database that we use internally as well to grant transfer credit. So whatever you see on that transfer credit search tool is what we would actually, our evaluators would use to give you credit for those programs. Mm-hmm. As a general rule, for any university courses you've done in the US or in Canada, you're guaranteed at minimum generic credit for the courses you've taken. So let's say you go into our transfer credit search tool and you don't see the course that you've taken, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get credit for it. Typically that just means it hasn't ever been assessed before. So the way that it works is that if a course has been assessed before by our faculty and is deemed this course is equivalent to a specific course we have, it'll be in that system. If not, what you'll have to do as part of the evaluation process is get your course outlines into us, and then we'll have them assessed by the faculty to see if we can give you more credit than what we would just normally grant you through that transfer credit search tool.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's really helpful for transfer students to kind of get an idea, at least, of like what would transfer over. So I know that there are some high school students who are taking dual credit courses, and sometimes we get questions about if a dual credit course would make somebody a transfer applicant or if they would still be a high school applicant.
So they would still be considered a high school applicant. The only time that we'd use dual credit as part of the evaluation for a transfer student is if they had so much dual credit that now they have over 30 units of coursework, and then we can do a full transfer evaluation off of their courses. But typically, if you're only doing a couple courses, like through some of the schools here in Calgary, then it's totally fine. You'll still get credit for those courses that can work towards your degree, but you won't be looked at any differently.
Do you have an idea of what the GPA range for students looking to transfer to the University of Calgary is? I know that we tell high school students like the percentage grade range, but is there a specific like GPA grade range that transfer students can kind of keep an eye on?
Yeah, so it depends on the program. I would say generally speaking for general arts or maybe some of our science programs, you're looking around the 2.3 to 2.6 range. That's on a 4.0 scale. Roughly, you're looking at C plus, B minus. And that can go all the way up to something like our high threes, so like 3.6 to 3.9. Some specific programs like social work might be a little bit lower, around the 2.3. And then some of our honors science programs, some of our other super popular programs like nursing, kinesiology could be anywhere from 3.7 all the way up to even 4.0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of similar to like high school applicants where it's like it all kind of depends on like the applicant pool.
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, the high school average is roughly similar to the GPA requirement if you converted those over.
Mm-hmm.
And then if your school, for example, doesn't use the 4.0 scale or uses 4.3 or just uses percentage grades, then we'll convert those grades over to our letter scale.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. And then are there still required high school courses that transfer students need to have for admission into our programs? I know that there's some programs that require like specific university or post-secondary classes, but are there any high school classes that are required?
Yep. Yeah, there definitely are some. It depends on the program again. A lot of the stuff is pretty case by case. So if you ever have any questions or you're ever wondering, how will I be looked at specifically under my circumstances, I recommend you reach out to me or one of my other colleagues. But some programs like arts and science will just want to see that you had the prerequisite high school courses because those are going to be needed for your first year classes that you're taking. We don't actually care about the grades, so if as long as you've passed those courses, that's fine. But we want to still see those completed, even if let's say you had a previous degree and you were missing a high school science course for biology, for example, then you would need to take that bio course still.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just to have like a good foundation going into like that first year.
I would say some other programs as well have both. So there's potentially high school and post-secondary course requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And then some programs are just specifically post-secondary requirements. Usually that means that the high school courses are superseded by those post-secondary courses. So we don't actually need to see your high school transcript.
Okay. Perfect. And then because university semesters are a little bit different than high school semesters, is there a little bit of a different timeline for transfer students to submit their application or complete their courses used for admission or submit any transcripts or anything like that? Any of that documentation, is the timeline a little bit different?
It is a little bit different, but it's pretty similar to high school. So if you are in progress, meaning that you are taking classes in the fall semester prior to the year that you're applying into, so for us, let's say you're applying in for fall 2024, if you're in classes right now in fall 2023, we're going to wait until those classes are finished. So the first evaluation that you'll have is after the fall semester is over, sometime in January, February, March, depending on when you get those transcripts into us. For us, that's considered early admission. So it's a little bit different from a high school that we're not, that we're looking at you quite a bit later, but it's usually just because you don't have enough coursework for us to actually deem you as a transfer student. If you don't have an offer into the program at that point, then we'll look at you again after the winter semester, so after April, and that would be based off of that winter semester and prior until we get to the amount of units that we need for your program. But again, it depends on if you get that offer or not. If you're not in any courses, so let's say you just finished, you did some post-secondary work, but you just finished your classes now and you just wanted to reapply to a different program, then it's very similar to high school, where if you are finished high school, we'll just look at your courses as soon as you get your transcript into us. So that means potentially you could get offered a lot sooner, but a majority of our offers are given out after that first semester.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then how do we determine a student's admissions average from their previously completed courses? So I know like for high school, we've got the 5 that we evaluate them on. How is that a little bit different for transfer students? How do we get that GPA from them?
So for most of our programs, we're going to look at the most recent 30 units of coursework. So typically that means 10 courses. And then that overall average, depending on however well you did, would be what your GPA is. Some programs, something like nursing, electrical engineering, have a little bit of a different application process. We're looking at, maybe less courses or more courses than 30, but for almost all of our programs, it will be those 30 units. And then for everything except for really second year engineering specific streams, it would be in any course you took. So for example, if you wanted to go into psychology, but your previous experience was in engineering, but you had the competitive admission average, you would get into the program no differently than if you had 10 psychology courses.
Okay. So lots of students do come to us sometimes with 2, maybe even 3 years of post-secondary under their belt. What is the maximum number of transfer credits we can accept from a student's previous study?
The maximum number of credits would be 60. Essentially, half of your degree would need to be done actually within the program that you're applying into. And so for students that maybe have more than 60 units, we'll post everything onto your file. So we'll post, more than 60 units of credit potentially, but we'd be more so working with the faculty to see, okay, well, from what's been posted, what is going to be the most important to actually meet your degree requirements, where you would have to do at minimum those 2 years actually within the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then if a student enters into a program at the University of Calgary in their first year, but they wish to change their program, are they considered a transfer student?
They still are, but it's going to be a little bit of a different process. It's going to be like internally transferring into the program, which is the same requirements they still need to meet, usually, the GPA requirement in those courses, but now everything is handled by the faculty. So instead of coming to us at the admissions office or through recruitment, you don't need to go to us anymore. Your application will be done by the faculty. And the nice thing about that is it's called a change of program, is that you don't need to pay your application fee like you would as if you were transferring from outside of Calgary.
Okay, nice. So it's definitely an option for students to like change internally and do that change of program.
Yeah, I would recommend if you are, either you don't get into the program that you want to go into and you're going into something else, or you just have a change of heart, I would recommend you speak with your faculty because they can help you as well when you're in school, plan your schedule so that you're taking courses that actually transfer over into the program you want to get into in the least amount of time possible.
Definitely, yeah. So how does the transfer process differ for international students versus domestic students?
It's a pretty similar process. For most of our programs, especially the ones that require you to have a degree already, we can use international credentials. We don't have to only see Canadian post-secondary institutions as what we deem as accredited. The biggest thing really would be after your application is finished, how your courses transfer over to the program. A lot of the courses in Canada we have seen before, and so when someone applies, we're able to post these credits onto their file because someone else has posted it or someone else has taken those classes before. We know how it transfers over. But for a lot of international schools, this could be potentially the first time we see these courses, and so most of your transfer credit will be posted after you're admitted into the program, and then you would just speak with your faculty to help make sure that any courses you took actually can give you specific credit for what you need to graduate. If an international student is applying for a program that does require specific post-secondary requirements, then instead of us waiting until after you're admitted into the program, we potentially might also ask for course LNs for the program sooner. This really is because, like, for example, business, we have specific requirements such as microeconomics. If they've done microeconomics abroad, but we don't know if that course is specifically equivalent to what we require, then we'll ask for course LNs as part of the evaluation process. And so you'll know before you're admitted in, because we need that course, how that course transfers over to the program. And that's pretty similar as well for domestic students as well, that if you have a prerequisite course that needs to be used as part of the evaluation process, then you might know how your courses transfer over before then.
Oh, okay. So it might just like happen a little bit sooner if it's a prereq course.
Yeah, we will actually need to see that as part of the evaluation process for those courses.
Okay, perfect. Now, kind of speaking about course outlines, I know that transfer applicants sometimes get that item in their to-do list where it's submit course outlines, and sometimes it's required and sometimes it's optional. So are you able to speak a little bit more about course outlines and how they kind of go along with the transfer applicant process?
Yeah, definitely. I can kind of break it down into, I guess, two major sections, both like the mandatory ones as well as the optional ones. I'll speak a bit about the optional ones first. So let's say you get into an arts program. It's undeclared arts. You're not actually specifically going into a program. If after your credit has been posted and you want that specific credit for your courses, you've become a student at the University of Calgary. You're in a course and you think, maybe I've done this course before, or it sounds very similar to a course you've done, then you would get those optional course outlines into us, and then they would get assessed by the faculty, and the faculty would determine if we can give you that specific credit for that course. It's kind of like a bonus. It's optional because it's not actually required for you to get into the program, but obviously would help out if it can work towards your degree requirements. These course outlines can be sent in at any time, so even if 2 years later you're like, oh, actually this generic course credit I got should actually be something else, we can do that. The biggest thing for that is that we need the course outlines for the year that you took that course. So it's pretty important now, just so that to save you a bit of headache of calling your old school and asking for those course outlines, is to save your course syllabi and course outlines earlier, so that if that ever comes up in the future, or if you're just preparing all your course outlines to send in to us after you've been admitted, it's super, super easy, and then you're just waiting on the faculty to hear back. Typically for course outlines, what we're looking for is the course code, like the textbook that you're using, the grading scheme, the material covered, that sort of thing. That's kind of what we're looking for. In terms of for mandatory course outlines, that would be kind of what I was speaking about earlier, where if you're applying for engineering and you want to go directly into, let's say, mechanical engineering, you need specific first year engineering courses. If we don't know how those courses will transfer over yet, we're going to ask for course outlines, and they're not going to be optional because we need to see if they're equivalent to those courses for first year, like the common first year courses that you would take normally. And then if you had them, then great, we could admit you directly into mechanical, and if not, then you'd go into that common first year. So in those cases, it is important to get those course outlines into as soon as possible, because the faculty can take a little bit of time to get back to us.
So basically, like, if it's a required course for admission, you'll want to make sure that you have all of that ready to go when you submit your application. If it's not a required course for admission, you can kind of like wait, but it's still a good thing to submit them.
Yeah, okay. and that's like using that transfer credit search tool that we talked about earlier. That's how you know how things transfer over, and maybe how you know what has been assessed, what hasn't been assessed. So it's not like you have to get like 60 course outlines or however many course outlines into us. You only need, whatever you actually need that hasn't been assessed before.
Exactly. Have you received an offer to the University of Calgary and are wondering what to do next? Join us for our Newly Admitted Student Series. The Newly Admitted Student webinars will help walk you through what your next steps are for accepting your offer and picking your classes. Are you interested in visiting the UCalgary campus? Register for one of our Newly Admitted Student Tours to show you the most important spots to know about as a new student. Register at the link in our show notes. So I know that the University of Calgary also offers transfer-only programs such as energy engineering and social work. Are you able to talk about the different ways students can get into these programs? I know that there's different routes going from like colleges to the University of Calgary, or coming from another post-secondary into the University of Calgary, or even going into a University of Calgary program and then transferring into that program.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about that. I would say for social work, there's two major routes you can take. So social work is a program at the University of Calgary that we don't offer as a high school direct entry program. What that means is basically you need 2 years of school, and then you would start into the social work program within your third year. So even though it is a third year entry program only, or you do need university credit before that, it also means you're not actually in school for 4 years to get your bachelor's degree. You typically would only need 2, or maybe a little bit more than 2. So for social work, for the different routes that we have our university transfer route. Basically, we need 2 years of university courses that are transferable as non-social work courses, so quite literally almost anything else, and then specifically a course called Social Work 201 or Introduction to Social Work. With the 57 units of course credit plus this Introduction to Social Work course, you're getting 60 credits. 60 credits, half of the degree. You're starting your third year of the program. That program also has specific program questions you'll have to answer. And if you remember from earlier when I was talking about the social work average is 2.3, it's not because the program is bad or is easier by any means. It's more so that the social work faculty values those program questions as part of the application process. Questions to see if you're a good fit to become a social worker, if you're a good fit for the program, and then they basically just to see if you actually care about the work that you're actually going to be doing. The other option for social work would be our diploma transfer route. We have specific transfer agreements with Alberta institutions. Usually these are the colleges and diploma granting institutions, Bow Valley College, SAIT, for example, where if you do this specific social work 2-year diploma through an institution as previously mentioned, then you would be guaranteed to kind of go into your 3rd year if you had the average for the program. So doing 2 years at a diploma at Bow Valley College and then finishing up those 2 years at U of C is an option that you'll see some students do because let's say after the diploma they don't want to go back to school, they have the diploma, they could just go work if they wanted to. But then if they wanted to further their education and get that bachelor's degree, that's also an option for them that won't like quote unquote waste any time because they're really only in school for those 4 years. For something like energy engineering, it's a little bit different, but it's similar to that like diploma route in that we would only accept specific diplomas from SAIT and from NAIT. Those are like both located in Alberta, one's in Calgary and then one's up north. This unfortunately is a program where you need to have this diploma. There's no other way you can get into it. And instead of looking at those 30 most recent units when we calculate out an average, like for most of our programs, we're looking at your cumulative GPA for the entire diploma. So really that full 2 years of the diploma. If you have that, then you're eligible to go into our energy engineering stream, which is basically just one of the other disciplines within our engineering faculty that's only available for those students.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yeah. And then kind of wrapping it up, the final main question that I have for you today is just if you could share one piece of advice with transfer students before they submit an application or in the application process, what would it be? From what you've seen, from the common questions that you've gotten, is there any piece of advice where, you know, you really want to like hammer it home, make sure that you do this or make sure that you're coming prepared for this?
I would say a big difference looking at, you know, high school versus transfer students is that usually your values are a little bit different. You know, you're not really worried about the clubs and sort of maybe the extracurricular things on campus. You really are caring about your transfer credit and sort of the admission requirements. And I think a big part of it is making sure you're aware of the requirements. So like going on to our website or talking with one of us to see, okay, well, you know, I want to go into nursing, I need all these courses. How can I set my schedule up, or how can I prepare to take those classes so that I doesn't feel like I'm wasting any time trying to transfer into the university? While we can't do any pre-assessments of transfer credit, the transfer credit search tool is a really good resource for you to be able to take a look and see how many years maybe you might need to graduate. Because our timelines are a little bit different, because the semesters are a little bit shorter than high school, it's a good idea to talk to someone early if you're a little bit confused about what you might need. Because if, for example, you want to go in for fall 2024 into business and you're not going to have our first year business requirements and you're asking me even like now, let's say, what you need, it usually is too late for you to take the prerequisite courses if you don't have a good plan, because you just don't have enough time to take all those courses. And I don't want you to essentially wait a year because our intakes are only for fall, just because maybe you missed one micro or one macroeconomics course. And so really planning ahead, even like, you know, similar to high school, like almost a year ahead is usually what I'd recommend.
Definitely, yeah. Just that like forethought to, you know, think ahead, figure out what you need before it comes time to actually submit the application.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, the education is probably the most important part of why you'd want to come to school here. And, you know, even if it came down to the case of, do I continue at, you know, your institution versus come to our institution, it could simply be something as simple as the professors at U of C are doing really, really interesting research in the field that I want to go into. And it, you know, because every university is going to have the, like I said, like the clubs and sort of most of those, like the history departments and that sort of thing. But like if there's a history professor doing like really, really interesting research in a specific time period, you know, like that could be a reason why, you know, you might want to stay in the city here or come to Calgary. And like, because we have a really good retention rate, like a 95% retention rate of students that out of high school that come here to the University of Calgary, I think it kind of shows for itself that, you know, students want to stay here for their second, third, and fourth year to kind of complete their education.
And then because you are the transfer-specific recruiter, what is the best way for students to get in contact with you if they're interested in transferring to the University of Calgary?
Yeah, so if you're a Canadian student or you've done Canadian post-secondary institution and you want to come to the University of Calgary, the best way to get a hold of me is either through email. You can book an appointment with me, or I also have my phone number as well. I try to get a hold of students as soon as possible, but unfortunately, just because I'm mainly dealing with all of the students, I don't necessarily always have the time to, but I'll always try to accommodate you earlier. So, if you look at my booking links and you don't see that I don't have anything until, a couple weeks later, and it's super, super urgent, it's maybe this is your first year of university and you have 12 units of coursework this fall, and you're not doing so great, but you had really, really good high school marks, and you want to meet with me because you're considering about potentially withdrawing from a course that wouldn't be used in the evaluation process, and therefore, we would use your high school grades. Like, of course, I'd want to meet with you before that drop deadline for that course, right? So just shoot me an email. So my email will be in there. You'll find the booking links to that to meet with me virtually or in person as well. And then also I am going around Canada, so if you get an email that I'm going to be in your city, then maybe you can come and stop by and we can have a chat about that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the Choose UCalgary podcast today, Chris. I'm sure transfer students really appreciate hearing this information before they submit an application, before they make that big decision. So thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Choose UCalgary podcast. You can find Chris's email in the show notes or contact him at transfer.recruiter@ucalgary.ca. Make sure to follow our social media on Instagram, choose.ucalgary, and Facebook at University of Calgary Future Students. If you have any questions, please send us a DM.